This is Greg Trautwein with Maritime Reporter TV, and we're very pleased to be joined by Alvaro Ortega, Gazelle Wind Power CFO, to discuss the path for this offshore floating wind power company. Alvaro, to start us off, can you please give us a by the numbers look at Gazelle Wind Power today to start?
Well, I think that we can start talking about the industry, right? Right now, conservative estimates talk about 300 gigawatts of floating offshore wind market by 2050, and this is just floating. So that is the massive opportunity that Gazelle, as one of the providers of offshore wind platforms for floating, is getting into. Particularly when we are talking about what we need to maintain what is right now the commitment, the climate commitment of 1.5 degrees. We're talking about 15 terawatts of wind for by 2050, which is a massive amount, which is huge. And we're trying to tap that market. But talking specifically about our platforms themselves, we're talking about platforms that will be the base for what when on top will have the actual turbines of floating. Think that anything that is any wind turbine on the water, on deep waters, more than 60 meters requires to be floating. It cannot be bottom fixed. And 30 to 40% of the cost of a floating company, let's put it that way, are the foundations, right? So we're talking about a big part of the total wind farm and the cost. Ours probably will represent that we're trying to achieve like a 30% reduced platform cost versus the current submersibles that we have in the market right now. We are targeting 75% less of mooring length compared, so less mooring length, less materials to be used, going, like I mentioned, beyond 60 meters. And our plan, right now, we have like 40 employees, give it or take. So those are the numbers of Gazelle as of now.
Okay, well, again, I appreciate that overview, and I appreciate your insights because, again, it's funny because I know floating wind is still very much in its infancy, but it seems to be coming on very fast. So we're looking forward to watching this space in the coming weeks, months, and years. So, personally, I understand that you're relatively new to the Gazelle Wind Power team, joining just last month. Can you provide a brief on your experience in the offshore wind power market and insights on what attracted you to the position at Gazelle?
Well, I've been in the energy industry for almost 20 years, like 17 years plus, starting very, very early, working for the same company or same group, let's put it that way, in Europe, in the United States, moving from one place to another and working in both in what is more transmission lines, always in finance and treasury and investor relations in this case, but what is in transmission, in onshore, in solar, and offshore was a part of my career when I was the CFO for what was the first wind farm, largest scale, to reach financial close in the US in 2021 with Vineyard Wind, that is right now under construction. And that was my first, experience in offshore. I was there for 4 years, and actually I've been involved in offshore even in my last phase in the same company that was one of the partners of the joint venture, right? When we closed what we call the tax equity financing a few months ago for this wind farm, right, for Vineyard Wind 1. And that's where my passion with offshore started. So when the CEO of Gazelle Wind Power, John Salazar, reached out to me and offered me a CFO role, I felt like it's an industry that is very specific. There are not that many people that have the experience around the world. In the US in particularly, like even less, right? And I felt that I could add a lot of value to the industry and to what is going to be the next generation of offshore wind by being floating, because 80% of the resources of wind are offshore, and particularly offshore wind floating. That's what I mentioned, beyond 60 meters depth that you need. So it was a great opportunity, and I didn't think that I was gonna be changing from a big energy group. That's where I was working for more than 17 years at Iberdrola, which is pretty known. And I ended up, accepting the position 2 months ago and taking a month. And so far, so good. I mean, a lot to be done, but very, very exciting opportunity.
But can you discuss specifically where Gazelle is today in terms of technology development? Are there units in the test tank, in the water, or is it still on the drawing board?
No, so Gazelle right now is raising. We are in our fourth round of funding at this point. We have the prototypes at a smallest scale at the basin tests. We have done good, very successful testing in the Imperial College in London, in Plymouth facilities in England as well as in northern Spain. And so far, the results, again, at a very small scale, have been very successful. So our next steps is to develop and to deploy the pilot. And we're already working on that in the design with the target of having, starting more to develop it like deeper into the water, into the actual deployment by the end of 2024. And that's what we're raising funds right now. And everything is going, this is going to be in Portugal. It is going to be off the coast of Portugal, using private equity, but also looking for public grants as well. And the journey so far is going very well. And I think that we are going to be able to start working on that by the end of 2024.
Okay, that's spectacular. So, with your long career in business, I'm sure you've seen before that, when an industry is emerging, people come out of the woodwork. So when you look at Gazelle today, what differentiates you from other companies in the space?
I think that there's a lot of competitors right now, and it's natural that there will be a reduction of competition by natural, merger with other developers. Not in the case of Gazelle, but in general, that will happen over time. As our, let's say, principle for Gazelle and what makes us different is that the Gazelle principle right now, and I invite everyone to have a look at our website at gazellewindpower.com to see how it is different abroad where you've seen before. And the principle is that it separates the floating with stability in a single system. And that's something very unique because other platforms can make, other developers can make platforms float, right? But the point is to use less material. And that's what with this system, with the mooring system that we have, where you are going to have a weight in the middle of the platform that is connected through another three weights. And I wish that I could share here my screen, but I invite everyone to look at it. And that principle allows to separate like the floatability of the platform with the stability, and being able to perform in very rough waters, with, like in the case of Portugal, one of the hardest, let's say, or the highest waves that you can find on the Atlantic. And that's what we are going for that location as of now, among other reasons. And that's what is going to make Gazelle, one of the top leading technologies. And that's what we're working for, to become, to be able to deploy and unleash the power of renewable energy when it comes to offshore wind floating.
As I think you might attest, this is a particularly interesting time in offshore wind, particularly here in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
It's been a mixed bag year, and I'm talking obviously about the fixed bottom market. There's been a lot of changing financial conditions, inflation, supply chain disruptions, etc. From your perspective, though, I'm curious. As a CFO, can you give insight, on the financial health of Gazelle Wind Power, with insight on what you see as key maintaining financial strength with so many variables that are out of your control that can impact your cost and profitability?
Right. Well, I mean, I think that you touch a very good point that is in the US. It is said right now that the offshore wind business is facing some headwinds. I think that one of the main issues, if I can start with that, is I think that one of the main issues that we have seen in the past few years is that between the time that you close a PPA in the US until the time that you actually get your permit, the record of decision, it can take a long time. It can take a few years, right? So if you close a PPA that has no potential adjustments. And what has happened in the past few years is that inflation, commodity, interest rates, everything went up, right? So the PPA that you close is not economically viable or makes the project bankable any longer, right? So we're leaving that situation that I believe that developers right now, and I'm not speaking on behalf of any developer in particular, right? But I think that developers are trying to assess that situation by having some kind of like indexation to the PPAs that will allow the projects to make it profitable, no matter what happens, until you get your permit. In our case, and we're talking about bottom fix in this case because that is the more immediate in what is happening in the US. But of course, we're looking already, and in the US, the federal government has already procured leases for floating on the West Coast. So floating eventually will come. And I think that the opportunity for us is that we still have a few years to prepare for that situation where the actual developers are going to be using our technology, Gazelle's technology, for their floating platforms. And cost for us is the most important, or one of the most important factors when it comes. And I think that the developers are looking at it to take a decision about what technology. Well, they're looking at it as one of the main reasons to choose one technology or another. So I think that ours, because like I mentioned, is going to allow us to use less materials, and that's that our technology, the design will allow to use less material, probably 30% less versus other competitors. That's our goal. And also because it's modular, for instance, it will allow to be assembled on ports that don't require big drafts. The average draft, I think, is like 7 meters of ports. But some of the other competitors require much deeper draft in order to be able to assemble their technology. In our case, we think that our technology can be assembled with ports of 3 to 4 meters, and that is a big differentiator because it will make it scalable, right? It's like something that you can assemble on port and deploy on the ocean, a scalable way compared to others. And that's what I always say, like cost is very important. I think that we're very closely because we know that the developers are going to be, taking the decisions based on the cost among, as one of the main reasons to make that decision.
What is the plan? What are your tangible goals for Gazelle in the coming 12 to 36 months?
Well, I think that developing the prototype is our main goal, right? I mean, we're planning to have the prototype in the water by the end of 2026, but start working right now on it. We're already working on the pre-feed. Now we're going to be working on the engineering portion. So that is our main goal, right? To prove the concept, and I think that is want to make comfortable developers and third parties that our technology is real. But we are looking at what are the markets, right? I mean, we're looking at potential partnerships with developers. We're looking at strategic investors to come in, not only to bring, the equity, but also to participate with us on the deployment. We are looking at markets. We're looking at Asian market. We're looking at the European markets and funding partners in anything you can think of, like from shipping, from manufacturing. So those are our two, let's say, main goals. Is like develop the prototype at the same time that we go and look for what are the markets to deploy once this pilot is developed. Like how are we gonna be able to make it larger, right, and make it bigger and more scalable.
And that's excellent. I mean, you led me perfectly into my next question because obviously it's a big world. I sit in New York. I look at obviously at the East Coast U.S., but we cover globally what's going on in all facets of maritime offshore energy, offshore wind. When you look at the world as you ramp up towards commercialization, looking at that picture today, what areas do you see geographically that look most interesting?
So that's a very good question because our development team looks at where in the world we can deploy this technology, and like I mentioned, like 80% of the wind resources are in places where it's only offshore wind floating what can be deployed, right? So that is massive. When we look at the map, I think that the three main areas where we are planning, I think one of them is Europe, right, where represents like 60 gigawatts of potential or 139 billion of potential market. Asia Pacific, 80 even bigger, 81 gigawatts, 187 billion of market that we are, that will be tapping. And then in North America, we're talking about 31 gigawatts. That is around 71 billion that we believe that we can, that we can tap as a market, as a total market. I'm talking about numbers in general for developers, not only for specifically the platforms, right? But what the market means in those areas. So I think, but we're also looking in South America has enormous potential, and then Middle East and North Africa. But I would say that Europe, Asia, and America, the Americas are the main businesses areas that we're looking at. But again, our focus is going to be the pilot first. But I can also share the news that we were pre-selected for a project in Italy as a project that will be starting to deploy turbines by the end of 2028. It is on the news, but basically it's a 1 gigawatt floating wind site of Italy in the Adriatic Sea. And the developer, that is Maverick, that is controlled by Greenbridge, has released plans for this wind farm and has pre-selected Gazelle as one of the providers for the offshore wind platform. That it will be 70 turbines of 15 megawatts each. So we're not only talking about a pilot, but we're also talking about some specific projects that we're planning to use our offshore wind platforms as a pre-selected in this case by this opportunity in Italy. So
I know any business comes with its challenges, but when you look ahead to commercialization of this technology and moving this company forward, what do you count as the primary challenges that you have to hurdle, and how are you investing today to get over those hurdles?
So I think that one of the main challenges is bring this third generation of turbines, what we call, to place, right? We're in what we call 3 generations right now of offshore wind floating. The first one was probably to float, being able to deploy platforms to float and survive, but not to be industrialized. The second, that is where we are right now, is looking to solve the main issues of fabrication, assembly, and issues with very deep waters than in the west coast of the United States, where we have 1 kilometer or more, and the existing port infrastructure, does not allow you to deploy the structures in a massive way. And the third is generation, that's what we are trying to do right now, is innovation in the supply chain, improve the assembly process to make it scalable and easy to attach to, in our case, different modules that attach to each other, rather than having to produce the whole platform on a manufacturing facility and transfer that, which will be massive. And then being able to do this without having to make major adjustments or doing major port infrastructure investments, which can be in the billions of dollars in the case of Japan, if they need to adapt for offshore floating wind, and they need to make drafts even deeper. So I think that the main challenge is, to develop this third generation of technology, making it scalable, making it with less material, and being able to prove the concept in this case.